go through them. No doubt you've heard them many times before. This is a meeting of council which is being held remotely. The meeting is being recorded and streamed via YouTube, where members of the public are able to watch the meeting. Please note that any comments posted on the chat feed of the council's YouTube page during the recording of this meeting will not be monitored by the council. The recording will be available on the council's website following the meeting. All members have been provided with remote committee guidance notes, which includes all mobile devices should be switched off or set to silent so that we're not interrupted by ringtones. Please switch your profile to mute unless you are speaking. If you wish to speak, please raise your hand in order that I'm aware that you wish to speak. For each item, officers will present the report and then the committee will discuss it. After which, if there are any group leaders or deputy leaders present, they will be asked if they have any comments to make. Now, before we go to the agenda, I'd just like to read this out to all of you. Before we began this meeting, I would like to pay a tribute to Councillor Imelda Clancy, who sadly passed away last week. A respected councillor and chair of the Licence Committee, a warm-hearted, loyal and friendly person. Our thoughts must go with Kerry Smith, her son, and her family and friends, and I will miss her. Thank you. So if you want to turn to the agenda. And the first item is apologies for absence.
Yeah, no apologies for absence, but we do have the trade rep Keith Biddle and Mark Waller for the Basildon Hackney Carriage Association here today.
Sorry?
We have Keith Biddle and Mark Waller, Basildon Hackney Carriage. They're present today.
Okay. Declarations of interest. No?
Councillor Sargent has got her hand up.
Chairman, it's not for a declaration of interest. With respect to Councillor Kettle, is Councillor Kettle a member of the licensing committee?
Yes, she's filled in the vacant position. The group leader for the independent group.
She's filled in. I didn't think.
Yes.
Didn't think that we were able to fill a vacant position until it had gone to council.
For committee procedure rules, you can, and the monitoring officer has allowed that. So, but the proportionality on a report will still go to the committee and to full council. Sorry.
Councillor Sargent, you've made a valid point, but I think it's now been decided that it's gone to the appropriate people.
But without informing this committee, so what can that be minuted, please, Chairman, so that we understand? Because I didn't think, because it's got the membership on the agenda. I mean, I do understand the circumstances, but I just thought that there was a way of, a procedure that would allow that, because to put someone on a committee without there being an agreement by any committee or full council.
Kemi, do you want to come in again?
Yes, the group leader for the independent group was informed that there was a vacancy on the seat, and he's allowed to recommend to the monitoring officer who can fill that, and that can be reviewed later. And Councillor Kettle was filling that. And the agenda had been published before on the 5th of January, and that was before that seat became vacant. So I couldn't amend the agenda to reflect the new membership. Does that help, Councillor Sargent?
Yes, it does help, but the procedure, it appears, has been that it comes from a group leader. I didn't know, I was unaware of that procedure. I take your point. Thank you, Kemi.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sargent. Thank you, Kemi. Right, we come on to minutes, confirmation of the minutes of the Licence Committee, which is item 3. Unless anybody's got any thoughts about not agreeing it, so be it. But we could just go straight to vote on it. But I'm in your hands. If nobody wants to say anything, we'll go straight to the vote.
Councillor Don Morris has got his hand up. Councillor Morris has got his hand up.
I always understood that if someone came off and was replaced on a committee, that they had to go to full council to be authorised. I don't recall anything going to full council to be authorised. No disrespect to anybody, but there's a procedure.
Okay, I can make reference to that. What I did raise with the group leader for the independent group that there was a vacancy, and he put forward his wish to the monitoring officer, and that's been and can take immediate effect, because we're not changing the proportionality of the committee that it needs to go to full council. So that was accepted yesterday, and I couldn't notify anyone. In the meantime,
okay, I think you've explained it, Kemi. We need to move on. We actually did get to item 3, the minutes. Sorry, I didn't see your hand up.
we're about to
Chairman,
vote
as
on
long
the
as the
minutes.
point as long as the point has been made that we have raised an
Yes.
issue with this, because I mean I accept it for this evening's meeting, but obviously I don't believe that our group were informed of this decision. I didn't know, it just went to a group leader.
Kemi, are you looking to resolve this? Or can we move on?
I think we can move on. In the meantime, I could check the constitution to make any reference to that.
Okay. We'll look into it, Councillor Sargent. Right, item 3 is the minutes. And as I said, have we got any comments, or are we going to just go for the vote?
Go to the vote.
Anybody against going for the vote?
No, just go to the vote.
Okay, right. So it's the confirmation of minutes of the Licence Committee held on the 16th of December 2020. And I'll call out your names if you can say in favour or not in favour. Right.
Councillor Scarola, you will have to call each member, because it's virtual. You have to call each member by name. Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Holliman. For or against or abstain?
For.
Councillor Allen.
For.
Councillor Lawrence.
For.
Councillor Sargent.
For.
Councillor Green.
For.
Councillor Kettle.
I'm going to abstain on this one because it's my first time on the committee.
Yeah.
So
okay, that's not a problem. Councillor Ansell,
For.
Councillor MacDonald,
4.
Councillor Scarone, and I'm 4. So that should be 9 and 1 abstention. 9, 4 and 1 abstention.
Yeah.
Chairman, you missed Councillor Morris off.
He came in late, didn't he? He wasn't on my list. Councillor Morris?
I'm going to abstain, Chairman, because I wasn't at the previous meeting.
So you're abstaining, yeah? So it's 8, sorry, so
Yes, I'm abstaining.
8, 4 and 2 abstentions. Okay, now we come on to the main topic of this meeting, which has given me nightmares because it's so long and involved. I've read it about 4 times. I still don't understand it, all of it. So I think Rachel is going to give a presentation on this subject.
Thank you, Councillor. Can anybody hear me? Am I
No.
right? Yeah, all nodding. That's good. That's I'll
Very
take that.
soft.
Okay, I shall. Let me try again. Unknot my. Is that better?
A little bit.
Okay. So this is the annual report for members just to consider the licensing fees moving forward into, oh goodness me, 21-22. It's the annual report that we bring to committee members. I apologise to committee that we bring in just this one report. I was hoping to get it to the December committee, but with COVID it just ran away from me, unfortunately. But I'm conscious that we need to move this forward in terms of fitting with the other committee timescales and the fee setting and budget setting for the council as a whole. Now, I will qualify at the start because I know members raised the motion at the last meeting in relation to taxi fees and the possibility that officers would look into whether or not a further reduction could be provided. This isn't considered as part of this report, and I will give some further explanation about how we will look at that and address that moving forward. So the report seeks members' agreement on the proposed schedule of fees and charges for 21-22 in respect to the general licensing functions, with the exception of the statutory fees, which we include only for information only. The Licensing Committee is responsible for the consideration and setting of fees in relation to those areas which fall within its remit in accordance with the current scheme of delegation. The Council, as explained previously, is entitled to recover reasonable costs associated with the different licensing regimes that it administers. Each licence type is subject to a slightly different charging powers, and where discretionary charges are in place, these must be reviewed from time to time to ensure that they reflect the cost of providing the service. Charges that in most cases aim to achieve full cost recovery, including reasonable costs for administration and in some, not all cases, enforcement. The charges made should not be used as a means of raising revenue, nor should income be aggregated to create subsidies between different licence types. So, for example, a surplus in one is not permitted to offset a deficit in another part of the licensing activity. Page 10 sets out the fees that are being brought before committee and differentiates between the statutory and non-statutory fees, and where there is an element of discretion and those where no charge can be made at all. So that lists out all the different licence types that are being brought before committee here. The report also sets out the overarching principles of fee setting. The bulk of those fees, with the exception of skin piercing and caravan sites, fall within the remit of the licensing team. So it's specifically within one part of the service area. When setting these fees, we've been very mindful of the impacts this year of COVID. The standard council approach has been to apply a 2% increase against the fees, but we've taken account of the impacts on certain parts of the service, certain parts of licence holders, and the fact that the team is currently carrying a vacancy which has not been recruited to at this stage. A number of improvements have also been made to the licensing processes as a result of COVID, including increasing the level of online and streamlining of application processes. This work will be continuing, particularly with the likely dissolution of gov.uk as an application platform later this year. So there's an awful lot of work going on in the background, really, to try and improve the way that we operate, create efficiencies. And I know certainly Keith and Mark will probably be experiencing the increase of online. It's not perfect yet. We're getting there, but it's a move forward. So we are gradually getting into the 21st century. And I know Alex and the team have been doing a significant amount of work on that, and obviously with a view to trying to keep costs maintained as well, or reduced as well. So the headlines for me from the report is there's no proposal to increase taxi fees this year. The only additional point for members to note in that respect, and which will have to be ratified at a future committee, is that for existing drivers who do not maintain their online DBS, disclosure and barring service check, we will be looking to implement a charge for third-party completion of that check. This has taken too much officer time. In the last 3 years since we introduced the need for the online disclosure and barring service check, it has created a significant amount of resource allocation having to be taken in terms of chasing drivers, getting DBSs renewed to enable us to undertake the regular checks on the disclosure and barring service, which is now covered under the statutory guidance. So I think the only way that we can do this, and we are looking to support those who have allowed them to lapse for whatever reason for this set of renewals, but this will be the last time that we do it. I think we're just having to draw that line in the sand. It's taking far too much of our time, and it's inappropriate that it's doing that. In terms of the other license types, in general, most of them have had a 2% increase applied. There's no similar application for the sex establishments. Again, a business that hasn't been allowed to trade at all since March. So we've only got 2 of those, so it's not a significant issue for us. And in terms of gambling, also similar sort of position whereby the businesses haven't been able to trade in for most of the year, actually. So we know that the vast majority of those businesses are closed again. So we've again taken that into account when setting the fees. So the schedule of fees is incorporated as part of this report. I've also included, as I have done previously, details of the budget book pages, and also the table indicating the cost recovery principles within the licensing legislation. And as always, I'm happy to get feedback from members. It's a bit of a moving feast for us in terms of trying to get this report where it has a reasonable amount of information for members without making it a 600-page document. So if anybody has any particular questions, I'm happy to take those. Just the other so in terms of the motion that was carried at the last licensing committee, we thought it would be helpful just to set a bit of context as to where we are. We're seeing quite clearly, we've seen impact in terms of numbers of license holders reducing. So we've seen quite a significant number of vehicles disappearing from the licensing activity this year for the Hackney Carriage and private hire vehicles. It's our big renewal year at this moment in time. Alex is going through the pain, as are Mark and Keith, I'm sure, in terms of trying to get probably 60% of our drivers through the renewal process at the moment, and that is taking place at the moment. We are seeing, I think, a relatively good response to that, which is really, really good. We're getting a lot of drivers through the door at the moment, and they are paying their license fees at the moment. But as part of the grant funding that's become available as a result of COVID, both members and officers lobbied throughout to try and get the taxi drivers recognised in terms of the impacts that COVID was having on them. So I think we're one of the few authorities that are actually, certainly within Essex, that are actually making grant funding available to their taxi drivers. So we've managed to get, Alex and I managed to get an update this morning as to the latest position on that. So we've currently got about 600 drivers, and I know regular information has gone out to them to encourage them to apply for the grant funding available. And to date, 284 licensed drivers within the borough have each received £1,000 from the additional restrictions grant. So this payment is to help towards the cost of their licensing fee, along with any other fixed related costs they may have, such as hire purchase agreements, etc. In addition, 70 licensed drivers have been awarded a business adaptations grant of either £500 or £1,000 to adapt their vehicles in order to make them COVID secure. There's some additional work that's gone on around the wet pubs, and we are also expecting further grant funding to come out from the government as a result of the national lockdown. So there is still money available and still money coming through. and we will continue to lobby to make sure that the taxi trade are supported as a result of any additional grant funding opportunities that come out. So I just wanted to flag the fact that we unfortunately didn't have this information necessarily directly to hand at the last committee meeting. Otherwise, we would certainly have fed that back to members, but that will be reported in more detail at the March committee. So I'll leave it there, and then if members have got any questions at all, then please fire away and we'll do our best to answer those.
Is that the end of the report, Rachel? Can't hear you.
Unless you want me to read out the recommendations, Councillor.
No. But what I want to do is ask the individual councillors, because there could be a lot of questions for you. And I'm going to ask
my hand up, Chairman.
I'm going to ask the councillors if they want to speak and ask questions. So I'm just going to go through the list of councillors and see how many people want to speak. So,
we were asked to put our hand up, Chairman.
Sorry?
We were asked to put our hand up, and I've got my hand up.
Oh, I didn't see it, sorry. Yes?
Oh, what? Well, did you want me to speak, or did you still want to go through the list of councillors?
I want to go through the list of the councillors to see who wants to speak and ask Rachel questions. Okay?
Well, yeah, that's why we put out. Well, that's why I put my hand up.
I haven't read the list there yet. So, Councillor Holliman, are you going to ask questions, Rachel?
No, thank you, Chairman.
Right, Councillor Allen.
Yes, I wanted to ask about this
Okay,
the resolution I see. Okay.
Right, I'm just going to tick you off.
Okay.
Councillor Lawrence.
No, none from me.
Councillor Sargent.
Yes.
Councillor Green.
Not from me, thank you.
Councillor Kessel.
Not for me, thank you.
Councillor Ansell.
I just have one question, Chairman.
So you do one, yeah? McDonald.
Just a brief question for clarity, thank you.
Okay. Right, so we've got Councillor Allen, Councillor Morris. Councillor Morris?
I have no questions, Chairman.
Okay. Right, so the first question, will, if we take it in order, is Councillor Allen.
Yes, it's about the last week's or last meeting's resolution, where we voted for a discount of £100 for the various renewals of licensing of taxi licenses. I just wondered, although we've received a report on part of that, could we have a bit of clarification on why we can't do that today?
I think the primary issue, Councillor Allen, is that we would need to identify where that money was coming from. And so we'd need to work out where members could possibly identify where those savings are coming from to fund that. And obviously part of it is putting together the issues around the grant funding that's available. Part of the grant funding has been made available to support the drivers to pay their fees. And certainly, as I say, the number of drivers that have been reported as having been able to claim that grant will support them with paying those fees. So if for the March report, I think what we need to do is to bring that back to members, and if need be, we will manage that through either refunds or as a result of offsetting it against other fees that the taxi drivers have to pay. But as I understand it, and I don't know whether our accountant might be able to support in terms of the normal process that would have to be followed in terms of identifying where that funding would come from. I don't want to put Rhiannon on the spot, but I don't know whether or not she can support with that in terms of her involvement with other committees where that may have been may be raised.
Okay, so just reading that back to you, what you're saying is from the government grants you've been able to get and give to taxi drivers, that enabled them to pay these renewal fees. So effectively, these renewal fees are being paid by a government grant. So there's no need for Basildon Council to reduce that fee then.
So from our perspective, I think there's been quite good take up of that grant. I think we will be continuing to review that with our colleagues in the Revenues and Benefits Service and with County in terms of any additional grant funding that's coming in. So I think at the moment we're not in a position to make that decision. I think we have to bear in mind that 60% of the trade are renewing now. So that's going now. That's not next year. That's right now. And we will have to, as I say, if the funding is identified as to where that's going to come from, then we would have to address that moving forward. Now, whether that be with a refund of fees or whether that be with an offset against one of the other licence fees that the drivers may well have to pay, we would have to manage that moving forward. But it would have to be, and as I understand it, members have to identify what else they would have to stop in order to fund that additional expenditure for paying the licence fees. And at the moment, between the last licensing committee and this licensing committee, we haven't had the opportunity to get down to that level of detail. So we would do that for the March licensing committee. But at the moment, the renewal is going on at the moment, so it's not going to affect the next year's fees, if you see what I'm saying. Principally, a lot of it will be, a lot of the drivers are paying the 3-year fees now, so they will be covered for the next 3 years. So it's work that's going on at the moment. So it's almost in progress and therefore irrelevant to next year, if you see what I'm saying. But I think we need to reflect that in the March report. Does that make it clear?
Yes, thank you. Yes, I've got the hang of that. Thank you.
Okay, Stuart?
Yes, fine, yeah.
Councillor Sargent.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I've got to say I'm going to disapprove of what's been suggested, because it was agreed by all members last committee and positively by the chairman, who was very supportive of it. It was known at the last committee that we were having this committee so soon after that meeting, and we were not told at the last committee exactly what has been tested today. It was just what you have actually said today. What you said was, what it says in the minutes, you take it away. Well, it doesn't appear to have been taken away. And when it's been suggested that this committee would have to decide where we would be taking the money from, well, I would be quite prepared to do that, because if the money, if the administration has the money to put on such massive projects as the children's centre, the youth zone, then obviously the council must have more money to help the trade that are desperately in need of some additional help and support from the council. When you say about the grant, yes, and it's pleasing to know that the government have given £1,000, but it's up, I believe it's up to those drivers what they spend that money on, because they've got vehicles, they've got all sorts of expenses, including at this current moment in time their licensing fee. And I think that's why we put it forward as a motion, because at the time we thought we would give them, as a council, we would be able to give them some help. And I feel very disappointed that just because 200 of them have applied for the grant, maybe others will apply and they may not get that grant. So they might not get any help whatsoever. So I would still like to propose that this committee gives them the help that we agreed to at the last meeting. Thank you.
Rachel?
Yes, I hear what Councillor Sargent says, and as I say, the report will be brought back to March committee and will be managed, but it obviously quite clearly needs closer scrutiny than it has been able to be done over the last couple of weeks, so I apologise for that. I think also we need to be very mindful of the additional grant funding that's likely to come through and how that will support. Obviously, it's a discussion that I would need to have with my finance colleagues to work out how we actually bring that report back and how we report it, and also exactly how licensing committee fits in terms of making that decision on whether or not it needs to be moved elsewhere. Quite clearly, licensing committee has made that, has agreed that motion at the last committee, so it is something that officers will move forward. We're not in a position, unfortunately, to be able to support members to make a final decision tonight. And as I say, part of the issue from our perspective is that those licensing renewals are going on now. If members are able to identify where that funding will come from, we will manage that with the trade. That's not a problem, but we have to identify where that funding is going to come from in consultation with members.
Understood. Councillor Sargent? Reply?
Well,
Okay.
yes, thank you, Chairman. I suppose when you say, Rachel, identify where the money is coming from, we weren't told at the last committee, as I said, it's going to be rather difficult because at the next meeting in January, we will be that they will, the drivers will be paying their fees. And I think this is what we were trying to do at that time to help those drivers out because they desperately need it. There's already been a lot that are lost. And as I've said, if this council has got money to burn, then let's burn some and give it to the taxi drivers.
Okay. We've got two more people that want to speak. Councillor Ansell, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I think it's probably worth coming in to say that I don't think the biggest investment this council's made in youth services is burning money. I think it's a very valid investment. Just to put that back to the point. My question, I think Rachel, thank you very much for I think what's a well-written report that does the best to put complex information into layman's terms. I think the question, so in terms of take up for the COVID grants, you mentioned around 284 licensed drivers. I think that's roughly around 30%, a third of kind of all licensed drivers. I was wondering, it's probably keen to get Keith and Mark's opinion on this as well. If there's anything that you think could be done to encourage, a higher take up for the grant, because it seems like from very good support that the government has put out, to help cabbies, and I just wondering if there's anything we could do to help encourage the highest take up we can.
Rachel, are we encouraging people to take up this grant?
Yeah. Alex might be able to give a little bit more of an update on that. But in terms of, there's been at least 3 communications have gone out to the trade. Every opportunity that's been speaking to drivers, it's reminding them to take the opportunity. And I think it is fair to reflect that actually this is a Basildon Council approach. So Basildon has made this decision. This is not whilst the funding is coming from government. That we have an element of discretion over how we actually use this. So we are finding that we are using this, but other neighbouring authorities may not be. So I think it's reasonable to reflect that the reason this grant has been offered is because of the lobbying that's been undertaken to actually highlight the issues that have been both from the trade themselves, but also from members and officers to actually flag the fact that they have experienced some significant challenges. But I don't know whether Keith or Mark, Keith would be able to support in terms of his understanding or what the situation is with grant applications. I know he's done his bit.
Obviously. Andrew, does that answer your question?
Yes, Chairman. Thank you, Rachel.
Okay, the last question is from Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you, Chair. It's actually a similar question on 2 points, just for clarification, really, and I'm sure Rachel will be able to answer this. Regarding park home sites and regarding street traders, just looking at the table and the form, I'm presuming that for park homes, proposed change in fee charge, that's no change. It doesn't actually state that in the report, but explains that the fee.
No, I believe that. Yeah, sorry, councillor. I believe there is the 2% increase has been applied to the park homes. We've got 2 park homes, and so there is an increase in there. I appreciate that that probably the table that's been added has not been the most helpful one. And what was the other question was in relation to street trade. So street trading, that an increase has also been applied, but we have had that hasn't been fully implemented. So we're looking again. We're hoping, subject to COVID, which has been the excuse of unfortunately the 12 months, but it's creating significant impacts on our service at the moment. We are looking to implement. To review the current policy with a view to implementing street trading during the coming year. We recognise that we need to push this forward, and it's been a difficulty again with staff changes and trying to keep the service running with the existing demands. So that is something we'll be bringing in. So effectively, nobody's being charged anything at the moment, but we've included it as part of the fee round anyway. And quite clearly, I think a lot of the mobile traders are continuing to trade, and even during the lockdown period as well. So does that help?
Yes, thank you, Chair. It just that in general terms, the report implies that there's been a 2% increase everywhere, but just reading the specific report for each bit, that wasn't, it wasn't explicit.
Yes,
so I just wanted, and I had actually read it as no change. So I'm glad I asked that question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. We now come to the vote, and we're voting on the recommendation that the proposed fees and charges for all
Councillor Scarola, sorry, excuse me. And Keith wanted to speak, and Councillor Sargent has got her hand up again.
Oh, okay. Councillor Sargent.
Can we let Keith came before me, Chairman?
Sorry?
Keith was going to speak before myself, Chairman.
Okay. Yes.
Hello, John. Sorry. The ARG grant that the drivers got of the £1,000, that was the first assistance we'd had after 9 months of COVID. It was towards the fixed costs that the drivers had. So that was either their HP, their insurance, the road tax, the maintenance, and some towards the fees as well. Or it could be if they were leasing a vehicle, and additional fees there. So drivers were facing sort of a minimum of £400 up to £1,300 a month of fees or fixed costs for an 8-month period without any assistance. The £1,000 has been issued, and we did ask at the time, are drivers expected to pay their fees out of that money? And we weren't given a proper answer to say, oh yeah, you need to keep back £190 of that to pay your fees. And so I'm a bit now shocked to hear that drivers were expected to pay that £190 out of the fees of the ARG grant that they've been given. I understand the point that there may be additional fees coming, and that may be our way of helping with those fees coming along. The council has also kindly offered to do split fees so that the drivers wouldn't have to pay that money straight away. They would pay it over a 6-month set of payments. But I worked over Christmas and New Year, and I earned about 5% of my normal taking for that period of year, with no pubs, no clubs, theatres open, no parties, office parties, anything like that going on. The drivers have really struggled over that period, and that money would have gotten through, the extra money they would normally earn in that period would get them through to March. They've now got none of that money. They're going to struggle, especially as we're staying in lockdown, and we've been told that lockdown could be March, April time before we actually get out, and it could get worse. So I'm concerned that if the fees are starting to be asked for, that the drivers won't have it, even if though they've got that £1,000. Now, the second point Rachel was making and about the numbers of drivers, it is an easy online form if you understand computers and your phones, etc. Last week, I spent on average 5 hours per day on the phone or going to meet drivers while they sat in one vehicle and I sat in another vehicle, helping them fill out their applications. And it wasn't just for the ARG, it was some adoption grants, and it was some with their badges as well, because this is new. This is a new policy we brought in with the more electronic side of it. And drivers have struggled to understand what they need and what they don't need. And obviously we normally do a follow-up after all this process has gone on, and Rachel sits down and we are allowed to put our input in, etc. And one of the things will be that it does need to be explained a bit better than just tick this box, tick that box. Drivers are still don't understand whether they've got to send additional backup paperwork in, what paperwork's required, and it's not very clear on each of those types of forms. The original form for the ARG and the adoption grant were just generic forms for anybody applying, and they didn't really relate to the trade. And so people were putting information in the wrong boxes, or they've had the grant refused because they've put the wrong thing down. So it's not as easy and straightforward as just fill out this box and tick it. And that's why I think the numbers have still been fairly low. We have asked extra information from the business department over the adoption grant as well, in that you can only get one adoption, adaptation grant, even if you've got 1 vehicle, 4 vehicles, 10 vehicles, 20 vehicles. You can only get the one. So if you get the maximum of £1,500, say, if you've got to split it over 10 vehicles, you're not getting the adaptations carried out. So we've asked for some additional information. If people are leasing the vehicles, can the person that's leasing the vehicle make the application if they have a letter from the proprietor saying, yes, you can carry out the modifications to that vehicle? So we're again waiting for those responses. They're great grants. They are wonderful and helpful. They've just taken too long to get to us. And the process is, I say, was a generic process for everybody, not just to the taxi trade. But I say, I'm a bit shocked that Rachel's there saying that they were expecting the fees out of the money that we got.
If I can just respond to that, Chair, I'd just say we will feed that back, and that was my understanding for one of the reasons for paying that grant out. So if that's not being made clear, Keith, then obviously we need to feed that back to our revenues and benefits colleagues.
Thank you.
Councillor Sargent.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. And thank you, Keith, for putting us all straight on the licensing committee, because the points you made are the points that I actually relayed to the committee, that they weren't necessarily for the license for the fee, for the license fees. And that's why I'd still like to propose this evening, whether or not it can be done, but I'd still like that proposal to go forward, that we get that money to help these trade out. We don't want to lose any trades. And when I say about money to burn, these people need the money now. And if we are fumbling about, thinking about, well, where are we going to find it from, we could be losing a heck of a lot of drivers because they are not getting the funding and they don't really know. They were too busy putting the money towards other things rather than their license fee. So I would like to propose again this evening that we absolutely give this money to these drivers to allow them to continue with this bit of help for at least another year, because this COVID is not going to go away anytime soon. So, Chairman, if the officer can put the proposal to me,
if I can add, Chairman,
can we add that on to the recommendation? Thank you.
Chairman, if I could explain, we still have that proposal recorded in the previous minutes, and it hasn't come back to the committee to say they're not able to do it yet. So I still feel we should give the officers the time to go through the result and to speak to our revenues team, do the appropriate as required of officers to do, and come back to the committee in March, because I would just be copying and pasting the same recommend. That's not been dealt with. It's not been ignored. It's recorded in a minute. Rachel has explained, and we'll just need to give officers time because we had Christmas the week after the last committee. So that's my advice, Chair, that recommendation has not been ignored because it's in the minutes, it's in the public domain, and we should be giving some time to come back to committee and report that we didn't act on the recommendation. So,
I totally agree. Rachel's explained the position. I understand the frustration from Councillor Sargent, but if you can promise us and make sure that we do get an answer on this, because time's running out.
Chairman, I've put a proposal on the table, and it's up to the licensing committee members as to whether they want to accept it. I know that proposal was put forward before, but it wasn't acted upon. And we were being told this evening that there were grants available and it was more or less unnecessary. I think hearing from the trade, we have been told this evening how necessary that money is. And we've already been told that that money will need to be identified by members and maybe go somewhere else. Well, we are the licensing committee, and I think that we should be making the decision as to whether or not the trade gets the funding that they need. It's not an awful lot of help, but if some of them don't get the grant, they may well lose their jobs and lose their vehicles, so they can't even work. So it's a proposal, Chairman, and I'm putting a proposal forward for the licensing committee to vote on. May I have a response, please?
As far as I'm concerned, I don't accept any proposal.
Well, I don't think that's your decision to accept it. It's up to the licensing committee.
At the end of the day, it's not the licence committee's remit. And Rachel's explained it, Kemi's explained it. We're not trying to say they can't get the money, but it has to be spoken about and it has to come from somewhere. So as far as I'm concerned, as chairman, I'm not supporting this.
You don't have to support it, Chairman. I've asked for it to go forward. I asked it last time and I was told that it couldn't be done, but then another Democratic officer came on and said, yes, I can put a proposal forward, because otherwise it will be lost and we will be told at the next meeting that we cannot find the money, so therefore it won't go forward. And I don't want our trade to lose out.
But you've already got the answer from Rachel and Kemi. They are looking into it. So, you know, making a proposal.
No, they're not looking. What we've been told, Chairman,
it's not the right way to go about it. It's already been explained to you about the money, right? Nobody's saying they can't get it, but there are ways and means of getting this. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm not prepared to accept this proposal as chairman.
I don't think you have to. I don't think you have to accept it. We just have to vote on it. You can vote against it. I'm just putting a proposal forward.
But you've already proposed it, and it's already been accepted.
Chairman, you've got another member.
Could I just add? We've got the finance principal accountant in the meeting. Can we ask him on what they've been doing so far since Rachel has put that to them? And give him a chance to address the committee on that. We have someone from the finance team at today's meeting, and he can address what, the work they've been doing on that motion that was put at the last meeting.
You've also got Councillor Morris.
Yes, and Councillor Morris wishes to speak.
Councillor Morris.
Sorry, Councillor Scroller. Is it from my perspective, Councillor Sargent, it's not something that's been forgotten. We've had I have had limited time to actually do this. I flagged it with finance. We will bring the report back as we've promised. I just wanted to try and provide a little bit of context to to members in terms of the current position at the moment. We are still looking to bring that matter back to committee members, so that a decision can be taken to endorse anything in relation to funding that can be provided. So it's not forgotten, it's still there as an outstanding action for us, but it wasn't an action that I was able to be able to fulfill for this particular meeting, and I apologise for that, but unfortunately I'm just not in a position to do that for tonight's meeting.
May I
Councillor
respond?
Morris.
Rachel, I thank you, and I do
Chairman.
apologise for taking a hard tone with you. It was just the comment on the money's got to be found from somewhere, and obviously it's an administration, and I take that point. And it's when what we don't want is for when we come back to the next meeting to say the money can't be found, and that's why I said if the money can be found for expensive projects, what we need to be doing first as a council is looking to people that need their living. You can understand my frustration because I really care about the trade. That's why I sit on the licensing committee.
We all do.
And I don't want to see any more of those tradesmen losing their lifeline. Thank you.
Councillor Morris.
Yeah, Councillor Sargent has put a proposal, which constitutionally you either or against. That's the constitution, and that's what you have to do in this circumstance. So I will formally second Councillor Sargent's proposal.
It's been seconded, Chair.
I really don't understand this. I mean, Kemi and Rachel have explained the position. They're going to come back. The money won't be lost if it's there anyway. And I find this very strange that we are talking about something that was agreed at the last meeting. Rachel's explained that she hasn't really had time, but she will do, and Kemi will. So I don't understand why we're trying to put another proposal which is identical to the proposal we put previously. And it's been explained tonight why. So, you know, I will not be supporting this.
We could take it to a vote, Chair, or if you want to let the finance accountant speak now, or because his hand has been up wishing to speak, or we can take it to a vote right away.
But what I'm worried about, I don't want to lose the motion. So if we lose the motion tonight, is the motion still there from the last meeting?
Yes, it is.
So there's no need to put another motion in, exactly the same.
Councillor Sargent is requesting, and it's been seconded by Councillor Morris.
Okay. We'll have a
Sorry,
vote.
Chairman, would I be able to just add something? Is that okay?
Yes, that's the accountant, yeah.
Is that okay, Chair? Sorry.
Chair?
Yes.
The accountant is asking if she can be allowed to speak. Officer.
I can't hear, sorry.
Okay, we've got someone from an officer, council officer from the finance team that wishes to address the committee and asking for your permission to do so.
Yes.
Sorry, thank you, Chair.
Sorry.
My name's Rianne. I'm one of the principal accountants, and I do work with Rachel. The reason why we need to have the reports come back is we do need to look at the financial implications, and I completely understand that there is grant funding available, but we need to make sure that there's enough grant funding available to cover everybody or other ways that we can fund the money. Because the service is a cost recovery charge only, we don't ever make money from it, so we don't have any spare money to just be able to give back as it currently stands. We're obviously more than willing to work with councillors to find ways to fund it. And I completely understand about big projects and different things like that, but for bigger projects, there are different ways to fund it. So obviously, I'm happy to work with Rachel on this and any other councillors that want to be involved in different ways that we can work together to find the money to give it back. But yeah, from a financial perspective, we just need to look at the financial implications properly. Thank you.
Okay.
Apologies, I've lost my connection, so I'm sorry if I've missed anything.
We've got to decide whether or not we're going to put this motion forward, even though you've explained the position, Rachel, and Kemi's explained. It doesn't seem
I'm
to
quite
be.
I'm quite happy to, on what the accounting officer has said, I'm quite happy to slightly change the proposal, because what the officer said was that they would be prepared to go and find a way to fund it, which I think is, and so adding that to last month's one, at least that gives us, the licensing committee, a bit more support to that previous motion. That's what she said, that they will go, that I can understand that they don't make money. I totally understand that, I know that, but it's the fact that they'll seriously look into how they can fund it.
I will seriously look into it, and I'd be more than happy to have any councillor's support of any ideas that they have as well.
Thank you.
Councillor MacDonald wants to speak, Chairman.
Councillor MacDonald?
Oh.
Councillor MacDonald?
I double clicked. I unmuted and muted again. Thank you, Councillor Sargent, for my raised hand function doesn't appear to be working. I don't think there's any doubt that anyone on this committee is against the proposal and the motion that was passed at the last meeting. And, you know, I understand the chair, I don't see the point of actually, voting on a motion that we've already voted on. However, if Councillor Sargent, because I don't think anyone's saying that, anything different from the last meeting. And I think the officers have gone out of their way to try and explain the situation we're in. If Councillor Sargent wishes to, as I think she has now indicated, say something different, then, I think perhaps we should listen to that and then vote on it. But I'm not sure what else can be said to change the undertaking that we committed to last time. So I just want, obviously, members of the trade here particularly to understand that none of us are against drivers getting this help, which, I was worried that was the impression that was being given. So, it's obviously at your discretion, Chair, but I believe Councillor Sargent might want to sort of change what she was going to say a little bit. But, we're all in favour, I believe. I certainly am. So,
Councillor Sargent, can you read out the motion?
Well, I will leave alone the motion from the last meeting, because Kemi has said that already counts, that accounts, and that will get looked into. But to add a bit more weight to that motion, going on what the principal accountant has said this evening, that they will go away and try to find avenues or ways and means of trying to provide the funding, which is a darn sight better than the licensing committee will have to come up with ways to find it, because we can't do that, or other councillors will, and maybe on service committees. Whereas I think if the licensing committee is saying they've agreed to the last proposal, and if we now say that we will leave it to the accounting officers to go away and look into ways of funding this, of seriously funding this to help those drivers and preventing them from losing their jobs. That's the proposal that I would like to.
Kemi, have you got that down?
I want Councillor Sargent to be clear. I believe she's asking that the committee is seeking to...
No, not the community, that the accounting officers.
I said the committee members. members are seeking to consider whether the discount of £100 in respect of the license renewal fees can be considered by officers with the view to look at which avenues this reduction can be funded by.
Well, no, not exactly, no.
Okay, so if you could give it to me, then that would help, please.
Well, the licensing committee,
yeah,
take advice from the principal accountant that they will seriously look into ways of funding the discount of licensing fees to the trade to prevent them from losing their livelihood.
But the last okay, to prevent, okay, I'll just let you finish to prevent. Because the last one, we're looking at a specific amount, if I am clear, a specific amount at the last meeting, and it was towards license renewal fees, it wasn't general about drivers' general fees. It was specific to license.
No, they're like, yeah, I still mean, that's what they're looking into. They're looking to look at the renewal fee, or the renewal fees. Just adding a bit more weight, trying to add a bit more weight to the proposal.
I think it's fair to say, Councillor Sargent, that actually in terms of any report we bring back, please don't mistake anything that I've said tonight in terms of, you've got to find the money. I think obviously in terms of funding arrangements, we will be looking for that. It's not a question of trying to hide behind anything. So we'd certainly take on board your particular comments tonight. So please don't think that we would be ignoring that in any way.
It's not yourself, it's not, it could be members that not us members, not the licensing committee, Rachel, it could be other members that might go against, so I think that's why I'm not saying that you or any officers, because I think that the accounting officer there has given me, a ray of hope that, that they could go away, and if they, and that's put to the members of the administration, and I'd hate them to say no when we've got people here that could lose their livelihood, and I think that's why I'm hanging out for this this proposal. But it's nothing against the officers, because I know you work extremely hard.
Just to add, Councillor Sargent, sorry, yeah, like I said, I'm more than happy to go and look at it, but there may be that we do need councillor support and ideas and things like that to come from it as well.
Okay, can we
rely on you to put something together, something, and then that's not your fault. It's not your
okay,
fault.
can we vote on this motion? Don't forget.
Sorry, before we vote, can I read out
the license fees and charges? But we'll hear the motion first.
Okay, Chair, do you want me to read it so Councillor Sargent can make any corrections? Okay. I have the licensing committee have taken advice from the principal accountant to seriously look into.
With advice, yeah, with advice, yes.
Okay, with advice. Licensing committee with advice from the principal accountant to seriously look into the discount of the £100 towards the license renewal fees, with a view for officers to look at avenues to fund this discount in order to support the trade.
Councillor Sargent?
In order to prevent the trade from losing, or some of the trade from losing their livelihoods.
In order to prevent some of the trade from losing their livelihood, full stop. Yeah.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Right, we need to go to the vote, okay? So I'll call people out. Are you in favour, against, or abstain?
Which vote, sorry, is it
Councillor MacDonald?
Sorry, Chair, sorry, I want to be clear. Is it vote on this motion or on the main recommendation? Sorry, which vote are we taking now, please? I could record it.
We're voting on this motion.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Councillor MacDonald.
Still in favour.
Councillor Ansell.
In favour.
Councillor Green.
Yeah, in favour.
Councillor Kessel.
Yes, I'll go with the officers in favour.
Councillor Morris.
In favour.
Councillor Sargent.
In favour.
Councillor Lawrence.
In favour.
Councillor Allen.
In favour.
Councillor Hollyman.
I'm sorry, Chair, I haven't got a clue what's been said here.
We're voting on a motion, Peter.
Yeah, I lost track of what the motion was in the first place. I mean, can you say it again? Is it substantial, or is it the secondary motion? I've totally lost the plot on this one. I'm sorry.
Kemi, can you read it out to Peter, please?
The motion is that the licensing committee, with advice from officers from the principal accountant, to seriously look into the discount of £100 towards the license renewal fees, with a view for officers to take a look at the avenue to fund this discount in order to prevent some of the trade from losing their livelihood.
I think there was a bit there, Kemi, that was a little bit duplicated.
Oh, okay. Okay, I'll read. The license.
You don't need to put the £100 bit in. We said that at the last meeting. It was just that we take advice from the officer that they would seriously look into finding ways to get the funding to prevent the trade from losing their livelihoods.
Okay, that the licensing committee, with advice from officers, seriously look into avenues to fund this.
No, avenues to find the funding.
Avenues to find the funding
for the renewal fees to prevent the trade from losing their licence.
Renewal fees in order to prevent some of the trade from losing their livelihood. That was what you said before.
Yeah, that I wanted that bit in. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, Peter, have you heard the motion?
Yeah, I have, Chair, but I'm just wondering whether there's one important element that's left out of this, which is any sort of time scale to it. It's just saying we're going to look into it. There's nothing there that I can see which says, yeah, by next meeting or by next week or by next year. So in itself, the motion doesn't appear to be contained or measurable.
Well, the officer has already said that a report will come back to the March meeting. So thank you for that, Peter. If we could add on to the end and it will be reported back at the next meeting.
If that's the amended motion as it was, then 4. If as far as I can tell, anyway.
Yeah, that's fine. To add that on to the end, that it will be brought back to the next meeting, because that's what Rachel said. It's coming back to the next meeting anyway. So thank you. Can you add that on the end there, please, Kemi?
Okay, so, and a report will be brought back to a future committee.
No, to the next meeting, the March meeting.
Okay, to the March meeting.
So, Peter, have we got you for a 4?
Yes, certainly, Chair.
Okay, so that's 100%. Don't forget, we've still got to vote on the licence fees and charges and the recommendation on page 3. That the proposed fees and charges for all non-statutory fees as outlined in enclosure 2 be implemented from April 2021. So we've got to vote on this. We've already had discussions on all the subjects that people wanted to. So I propose to go to the vote. and we'll start off with myself. I'm for it. Councillor MacDonald.
For.
Councillor Ansell.
For.
Councillor Green.
For.
Councillor Kessel.
For.
Councillor Sargent.
For.
Councillor Lawrence.
For.
Councillor Allen.
For.
Councillor Hollyman.
For.
Right, so that's a clean sweep. Oh, Councillor Morris, sorry, I keep forgetting him.
For.
Okay, so that's carried. I just wanted to bring Keith in to see what his thoughts were about the motions and discussions we've had. And also, if we've got anybody from the Dave Downton side,
We're
I'd
finished.
like to hear some comments from them. Keith?
Yeah, no, I want to take the opportunity to thank you all for your concern and the trade. These discussions do bring to light, you know, how well you do support the trade. I've got to say, I want to say our condolences over Councillor Clancy. Councillor Clancy was one of our regular customers, the trade. She used us quite regularly. She was known to have a laugh and a joke with the drivers. So the comments that were on our closed media sites were from wonderful woman to smashing lady. Everybody's deeply upset to lose her. And it was a shock for those of us in the trade that didn't know her so well. And we do send our condolences to her family, her friends, and obviously to all you colleagues, because I'm sure it affects as many of you as it does us. So, I say, what's happened tonight, the way you've discussed it and the way the points have been raised, the trade is recognising that the council is going as far as it can with us and trying really hard to do the best for the trade. Thank you very much.
Okay, is there anybody from private hire here?
No, there's no one from private hire here, but Councillor Allen has got his hand up. He raised his hand. Councillor Allen.
Councillor Allen?
Yes, the motion that we've just passed didn't actually mention the taxi trade. It just says the trade. And when we passed the motion before the last meeting, it was obviously about the taxi trade because that was what the item was about. But this agenda here is about all the trades, really. So the motion should really say to help the taxi trade, or put taxi trade in that motion when it goes to be published.
I did put license renewal fees, but I can put taxi trade. Yeah,
but we didn't put the taxi trade in last time.
No,
It
we
can only
didn't.
apply to the taxi trade.
Well, we didn't. That's quite right. We didn't. But the item was about the taxi trade. So the resolution at the last meeting was about Hackney carriages and the like. So it was obviously about the taxi trade. But this one is a general agenda for everything. So the motion we've
we voted now, Chairman.
Well, I'm just saying that to make it clear when it's published that the minutes refer to the taxi trade. Otherwise, it will just look as if it's a minute and a motion about the whole agenda, rather than just page 14 of that agenda. Page, yeah.
Kelly, can you amend that to taxi trade?
Okay, I will do that.
Yeah, because we understood it as we spoke about it, but it was just that when it's printed and others read it, it needs to specifically refer to the taxi trade.
Okay, that concludes the meeting.
Thank you.
A maiden chair.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you, officers.
Thank you. Night.
Thank you, all of you. Well done, John.
Yeah. It wasn't really me. I'm waiting for a letter from you, Kemi, aren't I?
An email. I will send that to you tomorrow. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Good night.
Yeah, good night. Good night, everyone.
Yeah, bye.
Leave meeting.